Apologies to those that arrived late, they can't hear me. Welcome everyone to this, the third Horizon 3 Biotech investing webinar for 2021, hosted by Horizon 3 Biotech Fund and sponsored and conducted by FB Rice and Monsoon Communications. This webinar is being recorded. And before we begin, the disclaimer: the purpose of this presentation is not to give financial product advice. Any financial product advice is given in the presentation. The standard disclaimers that it is general advice only applies. That is, it has been prepared without taking into account any person's objectives, financial situation, or needs, and therefore you should consider the appropriateness of the advice in light of your own situation and requirements. Today, we're very fortunate to have two experienced leaders in the biotech investment in Rosemary Cummins, who joins us from MST Financial, and Ralph Hinem from Volpara Health Technologies. A little bit about Rosemary. She's had 20 years experience specialising in healthcare research at Citigroup and UBS. She has consulted to several Australian and international companies and has also led the investor relations function for ASX 100 listed pharmacy distribution and hospital companies. So welcome, Rosemary.
Thank you.
Ralph Hinem is a founding director of Volpara and has been at the forefront of digital breast imaging field for over 25 years. Initially a research scientist at the University of Oxford, Ralph's innovative work in quantitative breast imaging technology led him to form first Oxiva Limited and then Mirata Solutions with Professor Sir John Michael Brady. Under Ralph's leadership, Mirata became the #1 provider of image registration and fusion tools before being acquired by US CTI. Ralph founded Volpara in 2009, and listed on the ASX in 2016. And the company now has over 96 patents. Or Ralph, you'll tell us about patents and FDA approval along the way. So we will be discussing, amongst other things, navigating the FDA approval and patent protection and also the ASX biotech sector's appetite. Both Rosemary and Ralph will be more than happy to take your questions later. So please use the Q&A function on your Zoom screen anytime, and we'll address as many of these as possible after we answer the pre-submitted questions. First, I'm just going to do the map on the horizon, where I comment on some of the important developments impacting our sector and thus investment objectives. Paradigm's IND application for its osteoarthritis trial has been placed on hold pending questions from the FDA, at this stage delaying potential IND acceptance by a few months. The questions appear related to non-clinical data. The clinical hold comes as no surprise given likely COVID-19 resourcing constraints at the FDA and recommendations from the pre-IND and Type C meetings clearly suggesting more data is needed to support the package. Japara and Adherium, unrelated companies, have both received takeover bids at premiums to closing prices. Both the Adherium and Japara boards recommend taking no action at this point until they have had a chance to review the offer in more detail. And disclaimer or declaration, I'm actually on the board of Adherium. CVS Health on the New York Stock Exchange recently announced the launch of CVS Health Ventures, a dedicated US $100 million corporate venture capital fund that will invest in and partner with high potential early stage companies with the potential for technology enabled innovation and disruption in digital healthcare. Might be of interest to you, Ralph. Roche announced additional uses for 2 of its mainstay heart tests, which could extend the diagnostics reach to hundreds of millions of new patients. The first claim involves globally used biomarker measurements of NT-proBNP, which can now also be used to precisely identify patients with type 2 diabetes that have a stronger chance of developing cardiovascular disease later in life. The second, troponin T levels, can help provide an early warning system for patients that may develop serious cardiac conditions, including heart attacks, after undergoing surgery elsewhere in the body. Cast Peak Capital, following on from its very successful investment in Avita Medical, where they made $100 million of profit, has hired Hashan De Silva, a healthcare analyst in Sydney, earlier this year to help manage its investments into the local sector. Other investments Cast Peak has made in the Australian biotech sector include Cyclopharm and Neuron Pharmaceuticals. Cast Peak is renowned for conducting extensive due diligence prior to investing, so its presence on the register should be of interest to other investors. And finally, Merck, that's international, Merck US, set to be cashed up to the tune of $9 billion, I presume US dollars, after the planned Organon split. And the incoming CEO, Rob Davis, said the company plans to scout for new business development deals. So anyone looking to do a deal, that's a target. Now to our panelists. Rosemary, can I start with you, please? MST Financial is a relatively new finance house. Can you tell us when it all started, what services MST provide, who's involved, and how many of you in the healthcare team?
I'd love to. Well, MST started probably about 3.5 years ago. It was born really out of Gerard Sateur at UBS and Andrew Goodsall, whom I have worked with for many years as the healthcare analyst, recognised that there was a need, or they saw a need to provide research. Well, the investors should have the right to choose where they get their research from. Under the traditional model, obviously, you'd contract with a investment bank and you would get all the research from all their analysts. And it may be that you liked the research from a different analyst in a different sector. And so the original model was, which is MST Marquee, was to encourage, poach, whichever word you want to use, the number one analyst in the different sectors that they wanted to cover. And they all came into MST Marquee. And then fund managers could directly could take the research from whichever analyst they wanted. So if they preferred the healthcare analyst over their investment bank, they could then take Andrew's research or whichever. So it gave the investor control of their research. And that was the original model. And then they found that they were approached by some of the smaller and mid-cap stocks, saying that they liked the model and they wanted to be involved. The difficulty there, of course, was that investors usually don't pay for research for the smaller cap stocks or the micro cap stocks. And so MST set up a model which is company-sponsored research. So we can do research for smaller companies and the micro cap companies with the company helping to fund that. We then found that, of course, that you needed a distribution model. You needed to be able to get that out. And we're also finding that a little bit with Marquee. And so they set up a sales desk. And to be honest, I think that's our greatest strength, is the relationship between Access, which are the small microcap stocks, and our sales desk, because it's a very two-way thing. It's not many investment houses where you could sit down with the sales desk and they could sit down and discuss in depth the paradigms, the neurons and a lot of the smaller stocks, because we present at the morning meetings regularly, and there's always a two-way feedback. Their desk give us feedback from the market. We give them feedback from the company. So it's almost the big model, the big cap model, but in the small cap environment. So the company, I think, like every company at the moment, is adapting and looking at need and what the clients want, and we're small enough and nimble enough to provide it.
And the size of the team?
In healthcare team, sorry. So there's Andrew is obviously in the we all help, everyone helps across the board, but there's Andrew Goodsall. We're certainly about to be joined by Dan Hurren, whom the three of us worked together at Citi some years ago. Dan's coming to join the team. Tom Godfrey, who worked with Andrew at UBS, is joining the team. They'll be joining in the next month or so. Myself and Chris Callis is also in the Access team. That's quite a big healthcare team.
Yeah, well, I'm guessing that might be when they all join, it might be the biggest healthcare team of the
I think so. Well, certainly it's a great team. We've all worked together for a long, for 20 plus. On Tom Godfrey, I don't know as well, but certainly with that, we've all worked together in different combinations over the last 20 years. So it's a pretty strong team.
That's great. Now, the audience are really interested in getting some insights from you, Rosemary. So what drivers does MST see impacting the biotech sector for the remainder of the year and beyond?
Good question. So I guess you have to look at there are two, in biotech particularly, I think there's sort of there are two types of investors. They're the ones who perhaps are there for emotive reasons, a very personal reason that they've had some exposure to a particular condition and they want to try and help encourage investment and research into those areas. That sort of motivation, I think, will continue and that won't change particularly. But there's also just the straight, financial decision in terms of which stocks and which sectors you want to invest in. And I think biotech or the healthcare and the smaller biotechs have benefited over the last little while because with COVID, the slowdown in economies, we've seen interest rates drop, bond yields drop. And so investors have had to go looking at higher risk areas to try and get the returns. If the economies continue to emerge as they seem to be at the moment and start to recover, we might see that there'll be a bit of pushback that they may not want to be in that higher risk sector. So you might see some funds coming out and going into different investment vehicles. So I think that's probably the thing to watch, the biggest theme in terms of funding coming into the sector. But it's been interesting though, because I've never seen so many institutional investors interested in coming in and looking at the smaller biotechs and what we've seen over the last year. They've even looking at pre-listing, often looking at companies that perhaps are coming to the market in the next sort of 1 to 2 years. We'll be happy to invest in those companies, particularly if they think they've got some late stage assets. So it's been a very interesting time and evolving.
Yeah, and of course we've had the Reserve Bank say that interest rates are going to be low for several years, and so therefore access to capital is very cheap. And I know it's a different country and a different economy, but it was interesting to hear Berkshire Hathaway at their annual meeting say that they are seeing inflation. They are definitely seeing inflation. It's everyone's adding to the prices of services, etc. So it'll be interesting to see that dichotomy.
What plays out, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Ralph, your website says Volpara has increased annual recurring revenue by more than 100 times since listing on the Australian Stock Exchange in 2016. Firstly, congratulations. And can you please describe what your AI software as a service is, and then what contribution has each of the new business acquisitions and FDA clearance and other factors you may refer to add on this spectacular growth?
Yep, that's all good questions. So yeah, let's talk a little about Volpara. We're on a mission to save families from cancer. And the way we do it is by applying AI to breast images and breast data in order to ensure early cancer detection. So we apply AI to ensure the images are done and that they're very high quality. The breast compression is optimal, right the way through to giving a very accurate breast density score, which is the amount of fibrograms of tissue in the breast, which is a risk factor, and the woman's lifetime risk. And then we provide practice management software on top of that to deal with productivity and spot trends and so on. So yeah, we launched onto the launched onto the ASX in 2016, and really we did that to move from capital to SaaS. Yeah, we had revenues already, but we were very much a capital company, and we're moving into SaaS. We are a strange kind of mix of biotech and SaaS. I really enjoy the mix now, but it's taken some time for people to understand SaaS. So yeah, in the early days, then we started off on the ASX. We had 2 or 3% market share, and we had 1 or 2 products. Slowly but surely, we grew our market share up to 9 or 10%. Started to get real momentum in the US market in particular. And then, we started to recognize strategically there were certain things we had to do. So, for example, we had all these images flowing up into the cloud, like tens of millions of breast images, but we didn't have the associated breast data to really make them valuable from an AI perspective. So that led us to the strategic acquisition of MRS in Seattle in 2019, which obviously led to a jump up of some kind in recurring revenue, although at that point they were mostly a capital sales model. So there was a jump up there, but not a huge jump. And then, yeah, more recently, we brought a Boston-based company, CRA. And again, there were two reasons for that. One was strategic in that we wanted more expertise in-house around risk and genetics. Plus, yeah, we also, yeah, that they were also profitable and they had good recurring revenue numbers. So yeah, it's been a very interesting journey on the ASX, and it's been great to have the firepower to actually go out there to do these big strategic acquisitions to get to a point today where, you know, our annual recurring revenue is something like $28 million New Zealand. We have about 32% of the US market. Gets, you know, every time a screening happens, that those images get touched in some way by our software. And Matt, we just announced over the last year a 60% rise in ARR. Now, some of that was organic, and some of it was inorganic, but the really pleasing thing was that despite COVID, we still got 20% organic growth. So it shows the real underlying strength of the company. But also, yeah, we've really enjoyed, you know, our ARR each year is increasing, which is great. And yeah, we've really enjoyed moving to that SaaS model. We think it's yeah, very powerful for many reasons. One, we get more cash in the door, which is always good. But two, it produces a really powerful dynamic in that, you know, I don't lose sleep anymore about just new deals. I lose sleep about churn. So yeah, the company now is very much geared towards happy customers as well as sales growth. So I think it's a great relationship now with our customers, and you can see a couple of videos come out soon on the internet of some of our customers talking about the amazing power that some of our AI software brings to them in helping get cancer detected early.
Ralph, when you talk market share of what market? What are you referring to there when you talk about 32% market share?
Yeah, in the US, it's around 40 million women a year get screened. So 32% of those women will be getting analysed by at least one of our products.
Yep.
So yeah, we give out an ARPU number each quarter as well, which is the average revenue we get per woman, and that's about $1.40. But because we have such a big install base, because some of the previous companies that we acquired used to sell on a capital basis with low recurring fees afterwards, yeah, the ARPU is kind of, yeah, relatively low compared to the new deals where they're up to $2.50 or so. So yes, the 32% refers to number of women touched, but
Yep.
yeah, it's important to recognise that that's just one product, and there's huge upsell opportunities in that space for us.
And I think I read somewhere that your aim for your ARPU is to get up to $10 US. How do you plan to achieve that?
Yeah, so we have a whole platform now of products, you know, 5-6 products, and as we published in our 4C a couple of weeks ago, yeah, we're already getting up $5, $6, $7, $8 from customers buying, you know, 2 or 3 products. So if we get them buying the whole suite, yeah, we're going to be up banging around that $10 mark.
Okay. And do you have any tips or insights for the audience on navigating the FDA approval and patent protection?
Yeah, so Matt, it's been interesting on the ASX. People have said, wow, you're a SaaS company, but also you have all these barriers to entry. You know, in biotech, there's lots of barriers to entry. So having the combination of barriers to entry and being a SaaS is kind of unique. And part of that barrier to entry then is the FDA clearance. Our products are our breast density product, which computes the amount of fibrograms of tissue in the breast, is a 510K in the US. So that took us about, getting the quality systems, took us about a year or so to get the quality systems in place, then getting the data and the evidence to go to the FDA probably took us another year. So there's about a 2-year hurdle there to get FDA clearance. Yeah, for us, it was relatively straightforward because it was a 510K, but it still took a huge amount of effort and manpower. And even today, we get MDSAP audited each year, which means auditor comes on site for a week, drilling us on all kinds of interesting subjects and sign documentation and stuff like this, which again produces a really interesting barrier to entry to people trying to copy what we do. The other barrier, of course, which you just touched on, is IP. We are based in Wellington, and the reason we're based in Wellington is in 2000, I sold the company in the UK, moved to New Zealand because my wife's a Kiwi. And in 2009, we said, look, the world is ready for all the stuff from my PhD. But the reason we're in Wellington since 2009 is that Wellington had a fantastic IP lawyer. So Volpara, right from the start, was born global. We very much focused on the FDA clearance. But also from day one, we've been writing provisional patents, getting patents granted around the world, doing freedom of operation searches, checking for prior art, all the stuff you have to do in the IP world. It's going to be drilled in from us from the start, because we're very fortunate to have the lawyer just down the road who was accessible, and amazingly for lawyers, was actually free by the government at that point. I thought that was a great initiative, and it's really set us up extremely well going forward. So we now have something like 96 patents granted around the world, and we had another major one granted recently in the US. And again, that just sets us up for a great barrier to entry and protection. Protection comes in many forms, though. It's not just patents. You've got trademarks and copyright and other things. Over the last 10 years, we've actually used copyright and trademark twice to get other companies to change what they were doing. We've not yet had to use our IP in anger, but it's certainly great to have that sitting there behind us. And it's great to be able to be in a position where we're very comfortable with what we're doing. Even though there's lots of kind of generic AI patterns sitting around, which look threatening, but until you compare it to the strength of our patents.
That's the first time I've ever heard a company has relocated to where the lawyer was. Are you willing to give the name of the lawyer and give them a plug, or are you afraid we might that we might all jump on him or her and make them too busy to service you properly?
Yeah, I think I'll keep her name secret, but I can say now she did move to the south of France, but so we're trying to get the company to relocate to the south of France, but a lot of the people are quite happy here at the moment, especially with COVID.
I don't know you well enough to know whether that's a serious comment, but we'll just leave it there. Thanks, Mel. Look, clearly you were founded on breast density screening, and you are now into lung cancer screening. Tell us a little bit about the lung cancer screening and what else we can expect to see in the next 1 or 2 years from Volpara.
Yeah, so what we've done in breast, we started on breast density screening where we've got the FDA clearance, and then we expanded by listening to customers into all kinds of interesting areas to improve patient care, plus increase their profits at imaging centers. When we brought MRS, though, we actually acquired not just a foothold in breast imaging, but around 10% of the US lung cancer screening business as well. Now, as a company, and I'm sure Rosa will agree on this, is especially smaller companies, you want to focus. And our focus very much, and my mindset each morning has been around breast and breast cancer detection. And that's been our big focus. However, we're very much aware we've continued to sell. We've got good ARR in that lung cancer world. But there's some interesting dynamics coming into lung cancer screening, such as in the US, that they recently changed the eligibility for it to double the number of people that can actually go to lung cancer screening. So we're actually seeing increased interest now because the numbers coming into lung cancer screening are starting to develop or starting to go up. So that's leading to more demand for our products. So we are now paying more attention into lung cancer. We're very keen. One of our strengths as a breast imaging company is we don't just have patient data and we don't just have patient images. We have a combination of the two, and it's that combination of the two which really stands us apart from competition. So we are kind of actively looking now into that lung cancer space, looking at all the various lung AI companies that are around and trying to see if there's one or two of them that we should start to partner with to really try and develop the business as the number of people going to screening actually starts to really develop. So yes, interesting dynamics. It's certainly starting to get more of my attention as the numbers start to increase.
Okay, thanks, Ralph. Now, just a reminder to everyone, if you've got any questions for Rosemary or Ralph, please ping the QA button. I've got another question for Rosemary. The audience is very receptive to biotech sector's appetite. Can you enlighten the audience as to the areas that are and are not currently attracting investor interest?
Certainly, in fact, when we were doing analysis a couple of weeks ago, we were looking at sort of 5-year return versus the last year and within the different sort of subsectors of the biotech. And interestingly, especially in the last year, what I would call the true biotech, the R&D projects that are coming through is very strong. The other is in a resurgence in life for nursing homes and clinical professional services. We've seen that coming back, perhaps not such a surprise. What hasn't, the more, not basic, but the more service type industries probably haven't seen the gains that the true, I think there's an appetite and probably impacted or encouraged by COVID. I mean, the whole world has now become very focused on healthcare and everyone's an expert on COVID and every vaccine and whether you should have it or shouldn't have it. And so there's tremendous interest in the areas. And so we're seeing that in the biotech that, you know, people are looking at the sector a lot more. And as I say, I think that combined with the economic sort of factors are driving a lot of interest, but it's definitely true, good old, interesting biotech that's certainly got the investor's eye at the moment.
Brilliant, thank you. Now we have, just for the audience sake, you can pre-submit questions. So we have a pre-submitted question. John asks, and I presume, actually, I don't know, this could be to either of you, where can I locate an IP broker, agent, deal maker in the US or Europe for an early phase 2A new drug? And
I think that might be a question for Ralph, given his connections with the IP world.
Yeah. South of France, obviously.
South of France,
good.
yeah.
Happy to go and do the research.
Yeah.
Perhaps not in COVID times, but.
So certainly, yeah, we're kind of, I'm not sure if that question is about IP brokering and sort of out licensing, or if it's about actually finding people to run trials, right? But
yeah, I think it's more the brokering, and it's because it says agent deal maker in US and Europe.
Certainly, if you find a good IP lawyer like we've got, whose name will remain secret, I have to make a note here. Take her name off website. She certainly has international connections into the IP. Yeah, just like with many industries, there's a kind of, you get a good person, there's a whole international network, and certainly we get sent through her, and also universities, they will come online, they'll find us and they'll send us interesting IP that we might want to license directly. So yeah, I think the first step is find yourself a good IP lawyer and then tap into their international networks to find people that you trust.
I think our host today might be able to help us.
Well, exactly. I was just going to say, we've had over the last 20 years, I've had a very good experience with FB Rice. So that's a good place to start in Australia, and they will have the connections to people internationally. We've got a question here for Rosemary. When you reflect on some of the successes we've seen in the Australian healthcare market, what are some of the key learnings for both investors and executives?
Good question. My sort of first thought that would be, as always, it's management. I think biotech, especially in early stage, everyone now understands CSL and some of the, obviously the bigger stocks, but in the smaller emerging biotech stocks, they're difficult. They've got very difficult subject matter. There's, the IP issues, actually understanding the disease, the potential treatments. And so I always think you go back to management. You've got to have confidence in the management, that the management tell you what's happening, give you a very clear picture of what their plan is and what sort of what steps to expect, and then the investor can tick them off, because I think it's not like a retail stock or something like that where we all go in every day and understand the basic mechanics of it. It's a really, really hard sector. So I think at the end of the day, you back management, because we all know that it is a sector, even with the best management and the best project, not all of them will get up, but you need to have confidence in the person driving it, or the people driving it. So I think management is very important.
Yeah, I totally agree. And Ralph, there's a question for you. How do you win revenue? Is it software selling? Is there any chance of government support like PBS as prescriptions do?
We sell to breast imaging centres, so they are our customers, and there's two aspects to ourselves. One is improved patient care, and we have about 300 clinical papers now sitting behind us to talk to show how we improve breast compression, minimise radiation dose, give very accurate breast density scores, and so on, which all lead to much enhanced cancer detection. But then the other side of it is return on investment, Matt, which is where that question is. And yeah, we are fortunate in that we have lots of evidence showing now that we can decrease costs related to FDA audits, for example, but also we can generate revenues by not having our software reimbursed directly, but if a woman is judged at high risk and goes on to have MRI, for example, then the government will reimburse the imaging site somewhere around $800 or so for that MRI. So two angles to what we do, and yeah, very much the government and the reimbursement does help our sell, and it does help our ROI story in there.
This may or may not be applicable to you, Ralph, but I've heard that reimbursement codes can vary from state to state in the US. And for an AI company, like a SaaS service like yours, I've heard of companies setting up in that state that has the highest reimbursement and therefore being able to charge because the service is being provided from Nevada, say, and therefore you're servicing the whole country from that one state and getting that reimbursement for the whole country. Is that applicable or relevant?
I've not heard of that. No, I mean, most of the reimbursement level for what we do in breast cancer screening gets set down by the government, but insurers might vary what they do state by state. So, for example, there's lots of state laws at the moment saying every time you have an X-ray, you will be told your breast density. But some states go another level and they say you must be told your breast density, and the insurer must pay for ultrasound to be done, for example. So there is variation around that state by state, but not so much in the overall levels.
And one more for you, Ralph. It says you've devoted much of your professional career to improving the diagnosis and risk of breast cancer. With respect to breast cancer, what are some of the future developments you can see on the horizon that will improve the lives of women? And I presume that question is saying not just Para, but other things you're seeing in the quest to eliminate breast cancer.
Yep. We've just done our redevised our strategy and some of the vision statements. So we're still very focused on saving families from breast cancer, and part of that is trying to detect cancers earlier women with young kids in particular. And I really do see, especially when you look at the amount of data people like ourselves are collecting, that prediction of cancer is going to improve. With prediction comes monitoring of the breast tissues over time, and then early detection. So, kind of in our space, I see a huge amount of work in prediction, but then there'll be a lot of other groups around the world doing work on prevention. And by prevention, that'll be a range of stuff, including drugs like tamoxifen or tamoxifen gels, or drugs such as erythrose inhibitors, which a company in Adelaide is working on at the moment, for example, which actually reduce your breast cancer risk, and they do it by reducing your density. So I see it's moving towards a world of much better prediction, but we need much bigger data sets, which we've got. We need pharma to come to the party with drugs to to reduce breast cancer risk and breast density. But then in parallel to that, you need companies like us doing the AI to actually monitor those drugs and prove that they're helping. And then you need, if you get past that and cancer still forms, you still need better and better detection techniques, which again, if you can start to move monitoring over time, you could improve even further. In the hardware world, one of the things we're watching a lot is they're starting to inject contrast into the breast and do x-rays of contrast enhanced digital mammo. It's an interesting dynamic. It's interesting in many ways. I think everyone's quite convinced it's going to really improve detection, but we need proper trials to see the false positives, and we need to understand how to deal with in a screening setting if there's an adverse reaction to the contrast agent, which is always a factor if you start injecting stuff. So yeah, I mean, we talked to a radiologist the other day, described this as the golden years of breast imaging. That there's a lot of reimbursement around. There's all these new techniques coming in. There's this amazing AI to wrap around what you do, and there's so many ways now to detect breast cancer much earlier.
That's great, thank you. And then there's an anonymous question from asking, any chance of government-run breast screening services using Volpara software?
Yep, there certainly is. We have a couple of states now in Australia using our software. Those public screening programs take a very long time to change. We just finished a 10-year randomized controlled trial, which one in Europe, in the Netherlands, and they are looking actively at changing now. But it's that kind of evidence that all these programs around the world need. And certainly we have a lot of discussions underway now globally around the results of that trial and the other benefits that our software works on. But Matt, I mean, it's one close to our heart. Yeah, we are a New Zealand-based company. It's been great to have Queensland signed up. A lot of our early investors come from Queensland, so it's great to see the women in Queensland getting the benefit of our technology. But now we'd love to see New Zealand use it, and some of those big states in Australia, and then maybe one day the NHS in the UK will even adopt it where the technology came out of originally. Maybe. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's fantastic. Thank you very much. We'll wind it up now, and just to remind everyone, the next webinar will be on Thursday, always a Thursday, the 3rd of June, the first Thursday of the month at 10:30. Apologies for today's slight movement, but we'll try and go back to 10:30. Just one of our panel members had an important meeting. But thank you to the audience. Your feedback and suggestions are always most welcome. Our thanks go to FB Rice, the patent attorney that you can source answer those earlier questions from, and Monsoon Communications for sponsoring and hosting this webinar. And finally, thank you again to both Rosemary and Ralph for joining us. See you all again soon. And on behalf of Horizon 3 Biotech team, goodbye and good investing. Cheers.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Thanks, Rosemary. Thanks, Ralph.
Bye.